They press Hakon a little bit further, though to be honest it's barely necessary. Alexander and Yoren can reason most of Ter Bjornsson's plan out from here. They realize that Ter Bjornsson has likely sailed away from Cadia some time ago, leaving Kolbjorn and what Hakon called the rabble behind, to continue to draw the attention of the serpentis. They determine his likely course. There's really only one route that can outspeed a direct overland march, sailing around the coast to the Castilian Empire, docking there, and marching up the Castilian roads into Tarathia. This would be hard to do without the consent of the Empire, but then the Empire is no friend to Tarathia, and Ter Bjornsson has apparently been able to forge some sort of alliance, or at least convenient magic-induced bond, with the Ruskins and the laurenettes by turn. Hakon tells them that Ter Bjornsson will not have difficulty passing through Kassala. He has contacts there already. Old friends, new allies, and he has a substantial head start. The comet was his signal to begin withdrawing and heading for Tarathia. Hakon is just gloating now, enjoying watching Alexander and Yoren squirm. Hubert drugs him, gags him, and blindfolds him, shoves him back into a cell to await his inevitable execution. Hakon's statement about the coming winter was true. The start of the game was in the very beginning of spring, just after the first thaw. Most of the campaign in southern Cadia happened over the summer, and now autumn has come and is halfway gone. It's several months to Tarathia at best. Even if the Serpentis army turns around immediately, winter will undoubtedly come long before they can reach the southern pass of Efrath and cross the snow-filled Midland Mountains. An army would be far too slow to make it before Ter Bjornsson. An army would be too slow. Alexander and Yoren consider their options. Report to King Edric and the Marshal on what they've learned. They are now being put into a conundrum. Their employer is Cadia, and, overall, Cadia has their sympathies. They want to protect the kingdom from foreign threats, and the laurenettes, sadly, seem quite threatening. But Ter Bjornsson and the Svards have wronged them personally, committed atrocities that must be paid for, and now threaten the seat of the Tarathi faith, a grave concern for Yoren at the very least. What's to be done? Do they abandon Cadia to the laurenettes and try to chase after Ter Bjornsson? Or do they let Ter Bjornsson strike at Tarathia and defend Cadia from the laurenet invaders? This is Steelshod. They have to find a way to do both, of course. A handful of Steelshod agrees to ride out of Arcadia with Marshal and a retinue of knights. They ride south to where they know the vanguard of the laurenet army lies. They are found by laurenet scouts before they find the army. Approach under a banner of peace and parley. They are quickly ushered into the presence of the laurenet general. Not Duke Baudouin, though he is the representative of the Dauphine family and, in a sense, the supreme ruler of the laurenet forces. The general, the field commander, is a duke named Gaspard Floret. Michel tells Alexander and Yoren that Floret is a reasonably honorable man, served the laurenet crown faithfully for decades. He won't have Cadia's interests in mind, but he is capable of being reasoned with. They are granted refreshments in a large pavilion. Floret is a middle-aged man, lean and grey, clad in partial plate that shows the scratches and chips of genuine use. Baudouin is of a similar age, but shows it a great deal more. Balding, softening around the edges, attended by two beautiful young women. Two of the monsters. One is dressed in the finery of a noblewoman, seated beside her father, leaning against him in a languid pose. Uncomfortably intimate. The second stands to Baudouin's left. Still beautiful, but her expression is hard and cold, and her beauty is marred by a few small scars. clad in steel mail, hand resting on the hilt of a long blade. No mistaking this one based on Michel and Léon's descriptions. Sophie de l'Aiguille. Sophie of the Needle. Baudouin's bodyguard and personal champion. Luckily for them, Baudouin seems content to let Fleurette do most of the talking. Fleurette greets them courteously, and shows proper deference to Lord Marshal. He laments all of the recent tragedies befallen Cadia, but takes heart in the knowledge that Lorraine is happy to extend a hand of friendship to their Cadian brothers, because, of course, they are simply doing what they can to protect the peasants and keeps of Cadia, repelling the northern devils and setting things to rights. Fleurette assures Marshal that Lorraine is happy to bear this expense for as long as Cadia needs, and once Cadia has recovered from the war, they can negotiate an appropriate repayment for the trouble Lorraine has gone in saving these keeps from the Sfards. Marshal tells Fleurette that the Sfards have left. The war is over, and they can handle their own keeps just fine, thank you very much. Fleurette chuckles. If that was true, why are there Sephardic forces infesting every corner of the southern countryside? Obviously, the war yet rages on, or Lorraine would have no reason to still be here. It goes on like this. Hidden meanings, political doublespeak, the usual diplomatic dueling. The bottom line is simple, though. The laurenettes aren't going anywhere. They are holding the territory they've taken, and they'll keep sweeping across Cadia, taking any keep they can find, even a thin pretext for assaulting. Alexander and Yoren grow a bit tired of the innuendo and subtle jabs. They introduce themselves to Fleurette and Baudouin. They offer their own advice. Go home. Return Cadia's keeps to Cadia, or they will, sooner or later, find cause to regret getting involved. Baudouin seems more amused than intimidated. Fleurette just seems annoyed by their impertinence. They are soon escorted out of the camp, no significant progress having been made. Marshal and Steelshod return to Arcadia to plan their next move. Marshal offers his appreciation at their help, but he sees their conflicted position. He releases them from their contract, pays them as much of the funds owed as possible, still barely half. He and King Edric promise to make good within a year, either with the additional gold or an equivalent in acres of land, but they simply can't afford the full payout given the current state of things. Marshal promises an even greater pay if Steelshod chooses to stay and re-engage their contract, but he understands if they feel honor-bound to try to stop Terbjornsson. He knows he would if his duties in Cadia were not so pressing and insurmountable. Steelshod divvies out the pay, offering everyone the chance to leave if they choose. Not a single man takes them up on the offer. Alexander and Yoren confer with Marshal again, and ride out. This time, taking the full strength of Steelshod and the Sons of Victory, along with a score of Marshal's knights. They meet the Serpentis a day out of Arcadia. The rumors did not do them justice. The Serpentis column stretches to the horizon, 10,000 strong or more. Many are conscripts and knights from Terathia's vassal states, but at least half the force are truly Knights Serpentis. Their white tabards emblazoned with Torath's sigil, a serpent encircling the world. The Serpentis greet them warmly, and they are soon brought to the commander of this army as well. The differences between the Serpentis and the laurenettes is palpable. They meet in a large, austere tent. Refreshment is water and hard bread, but the Serpentis general and his advisors greet them warmly. Yoren has to work hard to contain his giddiness when he shakes the general's hand, as he is none other than brother Darius Kashar, field commander of the Serpentis, a man every lad in Terathia has heard of. Kashar is older than the surprisingly young Alexander, of an age with Yoren, perhaps, mid to late 30s, lean and well-built, dark olive skin common to southeastern Terathia. Kashar is a legendary figure, one of the two most well-known living serpentis knights. Born to a noble house of the border kingdom of Syria, Syria was conquered by a Hassadian warlord, the ruling class put to death. At the age of 6, Kashar was the only member of his family to survive, sent away into Torathia. Orphaned, taken in by serpentes, raised in one of their orphanages for 2 years before going to Castle Saraf to train as a serpentis. Quickly gained reputation as highly intelligent, dedicated, and charismatic student. Took vows as serpentis at age of 13. Refused to take a new name as is common in honor of his murdered family. Apprenticed to brother Solomon, a famed serpentis knight in his day. Solomon was most notable for fighting the Castilian Empire during their last ill-advised attempt to break Torathia's hold on them some 70 years ago. He slew 12 members of the Praetorian, and faced down the commander of the Castilian legions, Octavian Phrygius, called the Iron Praetor. Solomon killed the Iron Praetor in single combat and is credited by some as winning the entire war. Kashar trained under Solomon for 5 years, mostly in Spitalia and the Midlands. He is credited with a number of small but significant achievements during this time. At 18, he took his place as a full member of the Penitent Fellowship of the Most Devout. From there, he quickly rose in prominence and prestige, eventually distinguishing himself as a masterful leader of men and strategist, and waging numerous successful torrides into Al-Hassad. Kashar is a living legend, attended by a variety of other serpentes, each a famous knight serpentis in their own right, with their own unique stories and specialties. But in the flesh he seems a simple man, cool, collected, courteous. They have mobilized here to stop the Spards and protect the churches from Vlari depredations. Kashar listens intently as Marshal, Yoren, and Alexander explain the full context of their situation. All that's happened so far, the danger still posed to Cadia, and the great threat moving closer to Torathia. He takes the news calmly, considers their situation aloud with both his advisors as well as Marshal and the Steelshod commanders. The first major issue is simple logistics. The serpentes have traveled a long way and just barely arrived at their destination. They simply don't have the supplies to immediately turn around. They will have to take some time in Cadia, drawing on the various Torathi faithful Midish kingdoms to resupply their forces. Moreover, Hakon's prediction is true. The Midlands Pass at Ephrath will be snowed in long before the army can reach it. They will have no easy way of crossing over the Midland Mountains until the snows thaw. Alexander points that there is another way through the mountains. The old road, thought to have been formed by the Thalmati in the time before history, cutting straight through the mountains, insulated from the snows of winter. As long as you can navigate the tunnels, stay on the right path, and avoid the native population. The underpass. A dangerous route, likely folly for a huge army. Too easy to have entire companies get lost, or supply lines cut by the native goblins. And the underpass is further north than Ephrath, so even getting an army to the underpath through the snow in the northern Midlands could be a challenge. But it may be the best chance they have. Alexander and Yoren point out that they navigated the underpass just last spring, and they believe they can do it again. Kashar is silent for a time, considering. Finally he speaks. He calls out to one of his men, Brother Torthian of Perinople. Torthian is a youngish man that looks even younger. Soft cheeks and a round face belie the physique of a fighting man, as every knight serpentis is. More importantly, Torthian commands a small company of serpentis scouts and light cavalry. Kashar asks Steelshod to accompany Torthian and his knights on a hard ride east, crossing Cadia, Kirkworth, and the rest of the Midlands with all the haste their horses can muster. He asks them to guide the Serpentis knights through the underpass and see them safely to Torathia's capital, the heart of the church and home of the Torathi Council, Nahash, the encircled city. He dictates to another of his people to prepare a simple writ, declaring that appropriate funds be drawn out to pay Steelshod upon their arrival. A generous sum is offered, as well as however many horses Steelshod needs to draw from the Serpentis army to ensure they make good time. Before he can agree in good conscience, Alexander decides that he must express his concern for Cadia and what the laurenettes will do. Kashar assures him not to worry. As he sees it, backstabbing a fellow Torathi kingdom that has been crippled by heathen invaders is the lowest sort of treachery. He can't countenance it. And, since his army will be stuck in Cadia for some time regardless, he assures both Alexander and Lord Marshal that he will strive to settle things between the Cadians and the laurenettes as much as he can, before he takes his men home. Alexander and Yoren know there's no way Kashar will meander his men through all of Cadia, returning the occupied keeps to the Cadians. But with his assurance, they can trust that at least the entire kingdom won't be swallowed up by Baudouin and his army. It isn't perfect, but it will have to do. Because at the end of the day, Alexander and Yoren both want to do as Kashar has asked. They accept his offer, promising Marshal that they will return when things are settled in Torathia. Gwyneth Carver, commander of what's left of the Sons of Victory, speaks up. She tells all assembled that the Sons are going with Steelshod. Bjornsson killed most of her men, and she'll be damned if they don't see this thing through to the end. After that, it's just logistics. Supplying up and planning a route. Torthian has about 50 men, bringing their company to roughly 100. They plan to depart by the following morning. If all goes as planned, they will haul ass to Nahash, arrive before Bjornsson, warn the city and the remaining Serpentis, and destroy the evil son of a bitch before he can achieve the bloody victory Hakon is so certain of. Let's see if this all goes as planned, shall we? Thank you for tuning in to Steelshod, a series by Mostly Rights, narrated by Tailforge. You can find every chapter in text format, as well as character sheets, setting information, maps, and rule documents on the Steelshod tabletop system in the link below. If you'd like to support the channel, you can pop down to the description and use the Patreon link for recurring donations, the paypal.me link for one-time donations, the Teespring link for shirts with the incredibly cool background art by Nobody, or use the DriveThruRPG affiliate link the next time you're looking to try a new system. If you'd like to support the author, you can find Steelshod merch on the mostlyrights.com store, or donate to the Mostly Rights Patreon, which are both linked on reddit.com/r/mostlyrights down below.